So welcome everyone to the discussion called De-Extinction, Hope, Hype, or a Hazard. This event is a part of the Open Readings Conference and it is organized jointly with the Students, Naturalists, Scientific Society. Today we will try to explore whether the recovery of extinct species is a real scientific field or rather a speculative idea that first of all raises hype and then more questions than answers. And therefore, we have scientists from 4 different fields. So here next to me sits Cecilia Manaya, who is an associate professor of microbiology and genetics at the Catholic University of Portugal. And as a researcher, she leads a bacterial ecology group at the Center of Biotechnology and Fine Chemistry. Then we have Vilnius University professor of genetics, Juozas Rimantas Lazutka, botanist Radvilė Rimgailė-Wojcik, who is a researcher as well at the Vilnius University and the head of Botanist Society. And finally, one more professor from Vilnius University and a scientist of geology and paleontology, Andrei Spiridonov. So first of all, before we dig into the topic of de-extinction, I believe it is important to briefly mention why species become extinct. Experts now believe that we live in the middle of the 6th mass extinction. And for those who are not familiar, mass extinctions are period of geological times during which a high percentage of biodiversity or distinct species dies out. Of course, in this definition, it is important to mention that short geological term can usually span thousands or millions years, right? So the planet has already experienced 5 mass extinctions. The last one occurring approximately 66 million years ago, and it wiped out dinosaurs. So Andrei, I have to ask you first, how do the causes of extinctions today differ compared with those of previous mass extinctions?
Is it working? Yeah, it seems it works. Extinctions is not an homogeneous category in a sense. We are talking about their ultimate and approximate causes. What is extinction? Extinction is when some kind of species or a clade goes completely extinct. No viable members exist in the nature. If we compare a current event, biotic change event, probably the greatest difference would be is that it's internally biotically mediated. It means that internal factor, one species drives, biotic and abiotic change, which cascades into many extinction episodes. I also reply, to your suggestion that, like a meme, that it's a 6th extinction. It's the modern understanding says that there were way more impulse-like extinction events. Those 5 were just kind of like the greatest ones, and they can span across the whole range of spatial and temporal scales. We're just working, on this big paper defining what mass extinction really is. Mass extinctions, they can kind of span time scales from millions of years. So the first great mass extinction or the later Ordovician mass extinction, it is thought that it spanned something like 6 million years of really bad conditions, like a super cold house with no chances to recovery. On the other hand, Cretaceous Paleogene event was just a snapshot. It's kind of like happened in a day. One day you have perfect world, another day is whole planet is burning, because of the asteroid impact. And there is everything in between, like from millions of years to days. So the processes span across many orders of magnitude across the rate spectrum. And the human caused global turnover and extinction event, it sits somewhere in the middle, of this temporal distribution. So it's pretty typical, would be, in a respect, to the rates, but causes are different. But as I said, each extinction had its own causes. But of course, there are also commonalities, how the biosphere reacts to this reorganization. And economists and evolutionists, we talk about, creative destruction. So the mass extinction in the sense is creative destruction. So when you destroy something, other species have opportunities to invade and change environment, change themselves. And also there is destructive creation, when you have expansion of something and destroying the older environments. So the humans were kind of like both, like creative destruction and destructive creation in some sense. Just the time scales are separated. So all in all, probably in the fossil record, we will see some kind of turnover event in the aftermath of human impact.
Last year, a paper by scientists from Arizona and Harvard University suggested that for some groups, such as arthropods, land vertebrates, and plants, extinction rate have actually declined over the last 100 years. And one of the reasons for that is that many people are working hard to prevent species from going extinct. So, Radvila, what do you think about that?
It's a surprising statistics for me. I don't know. But when we are talking about the rare and endangered species of plants, for example, it's really hard to evaluate how and to notice the extinction of the species, because there is only a handful of experts that can define the species and recognize it in the field. And so I am, as a botanist, really concerned about the knowledge that we are sharing with the younger generation, and that the abilities to recognize plant species is really low on biology students. They do not recognize the species they should. And the rare species are one part of the problem. The bigger problem is the common species, because we really do not have data about those species. And we do not understand how the communities form, how they keep the conditions good for them to survive. So the main question is how to increase the knowledge, not to only keep the species alive for the small group of experts to recognize, but how to increase the knowledge.
Yeah, but in case of plants, would you agree that we live in one more mass extinction right now?
Well, yes, of course. We first thing what we need to recognize is that we are living in the time when the species move really fast, and we can see that in mountains, for example. And for example, with the territories for the conservation, you can have the territory with the species one year, and the other next year, in that territory, the species lives no longer and moves upwards in the mountains, for example. The same thing in Lithuania. We also see how species are changing their natural territories where they live. So that's the movement, the speed, how fast plant species are changing their distribution is increasing.
Celia, I have a question for you. What about bacteria? Some people may think, oh, it's maybe not that bad that bacteria become extinct because maybe we will have fewer diseases. What do you think about that?
Oh, it's totally unfair. No, microorganisms are very important, not only bacteria, but microorganisms are essential
I think you can take a microphone.
to maintain our biosphere. So they are the ones that are responsible for recycling the chemical elements in nature, the carbon, the nitrogen, the sulfur. So we cannot imagine a world without them. They would not survive, but the other beings on Earth. And they were the first, and some people, they say they will be the last ones to inhabit on Earth. So yeah, it is a problem if they become extinct. But microorganisms, as far as we know, and I agree that it is very difficult to assess how far extinction has occurred, because only since 2000 we started to have a regular database of the microbial world. So probably in 100 years, we will be able to assess this, but not now. But in any case, microorganisms have something that is really interesting, is that they are redundant. This means that if a species that was responsible for one function, if it disappears, is extinct, some other will take that place. So, and this somehow it is something that a species can be extinct, but the function will be there. There is one thing regarding microorganisms that I think that is meeting your idea. I think that we are increasing the anthropogenic microorganisms in our lives. And these are the ones that are less resilient against the bad bugs, the bad microorganisms, and also are the ones that contain pathogens. So here we have a problem on biodiversity, I believe. But we need a lot of microorganisms. The more, the best.
Yossi, I have one question for you as well. How should we view extinction? As a problem or as an opportunity that creates niches for new species to evolve, to exist? What is your view on this?
I think that process is a part of evolution process. So appearance of new species and disappearance of old species. It was a common event. The main problem is the speed of these changes. But of course, at least some part of this problem lies in our mind.
What do you mean?
You know, we're speaking about invasive species. We are trying to protect our native species from the invasive species and so on. But for us, these species are invasive, and for us, these species are native. But for nature, I think it's no difference. Which species is local and which species is invasive. This is a part of general evolution.
Maybe someone wants to add something to this idea?
Yeah, I agree that the change that we are experiencing is a succession. So, and it also involves like our mind. So our ideas that we have also evolve and change through time. The main problem with invasive species at the moment is that we decided to introduce at least some of them. And then like we feel obliged to control them. It's probably impossible to control the invasive species, but still the idea is there because yeah, we decided to bring them.
Please go on.
I like this perspective very much. I think is the perspective that we should have, because normally we tend to see everything from the human eyes, but the biodiversity is much more than that. But regarding the invasive species, I think that if we have ecosystems that are somehow weakened, we are creating opportunities for, and in microbiology, this is like that. We are creating opportunity to bad microorganisms, bad, I'm simplifying things, but for them to proliferate. And this is indeed a problem. I don't know if this happens in other domains of life, but in microbiology, it is like that. If you have, for instance, a dysbiotic gut, I mean, if your gut does not have the assembly of microorganisms that it should have, you are much more vulnerable to some infectious diseases, for instance. So it's a good example how invasion can be indeed facilitated by a loss of biodiversity.
Thank you so much for all your thoughts. And I guess it's time to dig a little bit deeper into the topic of de-extinction. If you were to name one extinct organism you would wish to revive, what would it be? I would like everyone to answer this question, starting with Andrei.
For me, it would be Stellar's sea cow. You know, the huge relative of dugongs and manatees. which lived in Aleutian, near the Aleutian Islands. It was kind of like a huge barrel-shaped whale, almost whale-sized relative of elephants, which munched on the algae, which got extinct, something like 30 years after its discovery. Sailors just killed them all, for food. They were restricted in their range after late quaternary climatic perturbations, and kind of, on the top of this abiotic stress and the restricted populations, humans killed them off, but they were so unique, it's something like 9-meter long manatee, which weighs 10 tons, such a lumbering beast.
Please.
It's an easy question. I would like to revive Lepidodendron or scale trees. They are relatives to club mosses. Nobody probably knows what the
Yeah,
club
so
moss
maybe you can
is.
tell a bit more about those. Why are they special?
Lycopods are the oldest vascular plant group still here. And one of the branch of that large group were lepidodendrons, and they were large trees, but they didn't have true vascular system with the wood, as we understand it. And so they had very wide stems, and they were falling into the bogs more than 3 million years ago. So they formed the coal. So yeah, lepidodendrons would be my choice.
Interesting. Yasi?
No one.
Easy answer. Okay, Celia then.
I think I have the same answer. And because in the microbial world, I think it's very difficult to identify one. I was here thinking about the ones that were on the origin of life on Earth, but I think it would not be good to come back to that time. So yeah, I think I would not revival any species.
I see. And we all know that US company Colossal Biosciences, they have a goal to revive woolly mammoth. We all mentioned some species, someone didn't mention, but they have this goal. And last year, they announced that they had successfully revived an extinct dire wolf species. What they did, they introduced mutations into the gray wolf genome. They modified genes responsible for, first of all, for fur color, then for ear shape, muscle development. And the result was pretty good. The appearance of the newborn wolf was actually similar to the extinct predator. However, many scientists have raised the question whether we can really consider these animals extinct wolves. And the company, on the other hand, states that observable morphological changes are sufficient to claim that they have revived the species. So is that actually enough, Andrei?
From what I know, it's more of a PR stunt than a resurrection of species. Since this dire wolf, it differed, from Canis lupus. It belonged, to completely another genus, Enotion dirus. It means like a primary dire wolf, and it looked completely different, from what we kind of created. As we know of, it was a relative of jackals and painted dogs, so probably it should have been like a red colored, and the proportions were different, the jaws are much stronger, but I understand why they did that, because we introduced just small changes, so not to perturb much, genetic system, because it's kind of like a hopeful monsters, it's highly unlikely that you make a big change and it will survive, so they probably just got this idea, like changing little by little and seeing what happens there. It's more like PR stunt than anything. So some genetic changes which were or differences which were recognized with the dire wolf. They introduced the gray wolf, and it's just a transgenic gray wolf, really.
Jose, would you agree? How should we call these animals? Genetically modified, genetically edited organisms?
A few months ago, I participated in a conference of philosophers. It was a very interesting experience. And during this conference, we were speaking about ancient Greeks, ancient philosophy, and one of the topics was mimesis, or mimicry. How ancient philosophers understood this, and how this term, this idea is used in current research, in literature, and in biology too. And I exactly provided an example of not of the wolf, but of mammoth, or this, last year we also created a mouse.
Woolly mouse.
A woolly mouse, but looks like a mammoth. So I could call this like bioengineered mimesis or bioengineered mimicry, because they create an animal, a creature that is pretend to be some other species, but in fact it's quite a unique organism that never was before in nature, and hopefully will never will be in nature. But I seem to be a little skeptical about this, but I want to say one thing, that in science we need crazy ideas. And if you look back some 30 or 40 years ago, it was a beginning of a human genome project. And what was the idea behind this human genome project? The idea was that if we will know the whole human genome, we will be able to cure, or at least to treat, all human diseases. It was absolutely crazy idea, but this was a big stimulus to generate new and very powerful technologies. I think the same thing is with colossal biosciences. What we're claiming, the ideas, on my opinion, are absolutely crazy, but they are doing very good progress in scientific technologies. And these technologies could be applied, I think, not to de-extinction, but in some sense of resurrection of some species that are almost extinct, but we still have some living individuals. So these technologies probably will allow us to generate greater genetic heterogeneity, genetic diversity within this species, and that could help for survival.
But is it really possible to create animal that would 100% resemble extinct species using today's biotechnology tools, in your opinion?
If the species is really extinct, no one living individual, I think that it is impossible. If we have at least one, it probably could be possible.
Why this difference?
Because living organisms are not machines. You can recreate a machine, and then it could move for individuals, for animals, and even for plants. The organisms need to be developed. Yeah. For example, when colossal biosciences are speaking about the extinction of woolly mammoth, the idea is to bring Asian elephant and then to modify the genome of this elephant in such a way that it will resemble mammoth. But you know, at least mammals during their development, they learn very much from their parents, from their peers. So just imagine mammoths should live, let's say, in tundra, yes? And Asian elephant is living in subtropical climate. So who will be a teacher for that woolly mammoth to live in tundra, for example?
Radvila, what about plants? Do you think that it would be possible to recreate plants that would 100% resemble the plants that are already extinct?
It's similar to animals. If the species is extinct, it's extinct. Maybe you have specimens in herbarium, but the DNA quality is not enough. What people can do, and was done already before, it was resurrection of species from seeds that survived. In Israel, I think it's 2,000 years extinct palm tree was resurrected from the seeds. So that's why seed banks are really important. But similar to mammoth, it's very important to have not only the seeds that are viable, it's important to have the habitat and to have the pollinators, for example, to have the fungi species that are responsible for mycorrhizal interactions, and the number of endophytes that function is not known yet. But regarding the mimicry, it's really interesting. When we think about plants, we usually do not think about the mimicry in plants. But there is a parasitic vine that is able to mimic the leaves of the host plant, more than 20 species. So it's very able to adapt to a different host, and that's a very interesting question. How do the plant? How the plant is able to do that? And also another thing regarding the how we understand what the species is. So there is not a single saying explanation what the species is. It's more than 70 different ways to describe what the species is. And in plants, it's really difficult because we have hybrids, and yeah, one group of scientists want to have hybrids as independent species, but hybrids usually are sterile, so they cannot have offsprings. So then what is the hybrid in plants? And probably final thing I wanted to share regarding this question is that in plants, the horizontal gene transfer, when we do more wider genome sequencing, was noticed in ferns, that fern genome, nuclear genome, has genes from bacteria, and it's a very important transporter in the membrane of cells. So when we are thinking that we are changing the genomes, and we are first to do that, that happened a million years ago.
Celia, let's talk about smaller genomes. So bacteria have smaller genomes than plants and animals. Are we currently able to reconstruct it from scratch? I know that in an effort to better understand now eradicated diseases, scientists are searching for the pieces of DNA and researching them. So can you comment a bit on that?
Yeah, I was hearing the colleagues in the panel, and I was thinking about synthetic biology. That is something that is quite feasible nowadays for microorganisms. And indeed, it is either the reconstruction of genomes or the synthetic biology approach is very interesting to study and to see the function and the relationship between a given piece of genetic information and the function. And I think in that kind of approach is very valuable. But if we have a reconstructed or a synthetic microorganism, we are not reviving a new species or a species that was extinct once, For instance, we can think about the pestis. Yersinia pestis is the one that was responsible for
Blackness.
yes. And I think that this can be useful to make a study, but is never a revival because, well, in the lab, you have the organism, but if you put it in the environment, probably it will not survive. So I would see this as a strategy for investigation and as the merits, or sometimes as cellular machines, because in some for some applications, for instance, to produce some kind of drugs, are using microorganisms in this synthetic or repurposing of the genome of the microorganisms, but not as something that can be put in the environment and have a species back in the environment, because a species, and I agree, in microbiology is like that. It's very difficult to define what a species is, but even if we reconstruct something and if we put in the environment, this is not the same organism that we had millions of years ago. And one thing about revival that I think that is interesting is that it is possible, and scientists have been doing this, to recover organisms that were fossilized for millions of years in the form of endospores. And what is very interesting is that their genomes are identical to the genomes that we have of the organisms nowadays. So they are quite stable in this. The genetic information is quite stable in this case.
Each and every of you mentioned that it would be hard for new reconstructed, revived species to adapt in the new environment. Then I have another question. How could this organism impact other species and ecosystems? I don't know, maybe some of you already have some thought, or we can start from Andrea, I don't know.
It strongly depends on the scale of the organism you're introducing. There is a term, megafauna, and our world is essentially a post-extinction world we're talking about here, that we're going through extinction. But really, we are living in this survival phase. Most of things which could have gone extinct already gone extinct. For example, this Pleistocene megafauna, it's something like 80% of large giant animals went extinct, due to climate or human and climate interaction, whatever. But we are gone, and we know that now that ecosystems looked significantly different, from current ecosystems when giant animals lived, and giant animals were kind of like a norm for since they appeared in the Carboniferous. Just during those extinction events, in those sharp periods, were absent. So naturally, the environment would be radically different. For example, if you would really recreate woolly mammoth, it would completely, change the landscapes of the north. For example, during the last glacial maximum, there were populations of 100 to 200 million mammoths. Each mammoth works like a bulldozer for the snow. It's like a 200 million bulldozers plowing through the snow, changing the composition of the surface of the planet, changing the thermal regimes, thawing and freezing conditions, boundary conditions for the accumulation of carbon. It would be, it's kind of like what happened if we create one more species of humans, or some kind of similar animal, So if you create a megafauna, it will have a huge cascading effect, especially if it will adapt to current conditions, unimpeded, by humans. But of course, we have humans, another species of megafauna, which completely dominates, our scale of the world. Microorganisms, of course, different kinds of outbreaks, it can happen, but the first order factor is the size, because we know that, for example, large animals, they are ecosystem engineers. They just change landscapes. Humans are ecosystem engineers. Some part of humans even get diplomas of engineers, but It's kind of like our inbuilt feature, really, to modify environment with purpose or with no purpose. Yeah, so if it really would have happened, the impact can be massive.
Radvila, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And also, we already talked about the plants and invasive species. So even without the recreation of the extinct species, the speed how the species change their distribution is really large and fast.
Celia, what about you?
I was
Because Andrei mentioned that the scale is important, so would you agree?
yeah, the scale is important, but I was thinking that the closest thing that we have to a revival of an extinct species of a microorganism is used in synthetic biology, and there are this is feasible nowadays to build a new genome on our organism and to fabricate it somehow. And there are rules to produce these organisms, and one of these rules is that they need to have something that they can be tracked easily, and they need to have some genes that are knocked out in order to avoid that they can proliferate in the environment. But the knowledge is there, and someone wants to use this in the wrong way, and the hazard is a word that is there. This is possible as well. And it was not a long time ago that was a publication in Science that was signed by many authors around the world, claiming that the synthesis of mirror bacteria are bacteria that are produced with with D amino acids, and this can be tremendously dangerous if they are released in the environment. So if we are all very responsible and very aware of what we are doing, I think that there are no problems. But so I think that no invasion will occur. But if someone wants to do something in the mean way, I think that is a possibility.
Ozzy, would you like to add something?
Probably I can add to what colleague was talking about that woolly mammoth, but in fact it was a scientific discussion. I even read some papers about that. That was an argument why we need to de-extinct woolly mammoth, if we will have 1 million of them. And he told it will help us to fight with climate change and with global warming. So it was one of the ideas why we need to resurrect mammoths.
Just recently, a horse was cloned first time in neighboring country, in Estonia. When I was discussing this achievement with the scientists here in Lithuania, they mentioned that there is no need to do that in Lithuania, to clone horses, because when it comes to preserving species, we have other ways to do that. For instance, collecting the sperm and the eggs of the horses and the embryos, and freezing them in low temperature, and then you can store that for many years. So what are other ways to preserve species from extinction? I'd like to ask our panel. I'm especially curious about what is being done here in Lithuania, and maybe in Portugal as well. So, Ozzy, maybe you can start. How can we preserve genetics of some species that are about to extinct?
Okay, probably about plants, Radvila could add something, but I know that we have some seed banks, something like that. Regarding animals, I don't know about any efforts.
What is your view
using
on
genetical technologies?
Yeah.
But if you're asking about the approach, for me, it's quite interesting approach that is used by San Diego Zoological Garden, because for a long time we were preserving tissues of animals that were lived in this zoological garden in zoo, and they're using these tissues to increasing genetic diversity of that species that are under the threat of extinction. If I'm right, it was quite successful attempts with Przewalski horses and also with black-footed ferret that were thought previously extinct in United States, when few living individuals were found, and it was attempt to create a population, but it was a problem of low genetic diversity and of high level of different diseases among these black-footed ferrets. So in San Diego, they used preserved cells from former species in this zoological garden, and then they constructed, engineered some individuals that were genetically distinct from those individuals living before, and it was quite a good way to increase that genetic diversity. So this example, I think, is quite successful, and it could be, on my opinion, the main way for the preserving species that are under threat.
I should then ask, what do you think about cloning?
Yeah, it was the main technique what was used in these attempts. It was cloning. Yeah, that's okay.
So should we do it in Lithuania, for example, for some species that are about to extinct?
Do we have species that are worldwide extinct and only in Lithuania there are a few? I don't know.
It's just, I mean, the broad question, maybe thinking about the future. But, you know, we had cases with the like horse breeds like Žemaitukai, so.
Hopefully there is no need for
I see.
for Žemaitukai.
So, Radvile, can you briefly explain the importance of seed banks that already was mentioned by Josas?
Yeah, I would like to expand a little bit to talk about the other also ways how we can restore populations, for example. One of the things is that we can restore habitat and hope that the species can emerge again, especially in plants. They can emerge from the seed bank, that it's already there in the soil, not somewhere in the freezer. So that's the one thing. Another thing is we can reintroduce the species. And I myself, I'm working on the project on little moonwort. It's Botrychium simplex. It's extinct in Poland, Latvia, Estonia, on the seaside of all these Baltic countries. And what we are doing, we have one viable population in Lithuania. And last year we counted more than 7,000 individuals, and we are interested to see if they are genetically diverse. Maybe we could use that population in the future, the spores, for example, to try to reintroduce species in the similar habitats in the neighboring countries. So that's the thing we could do. So the habitat restoration, reintroducing the species, and it's also done in Žuvintas reserve with the Meldinė nendrinukė. I'm not sure how the species is Passeriformes, a family of birds. So yeah, probably that's the way to go, not to clone. On the other hand, we are cloning plants when we are propagating them vegetatively, so it's happening all the time.
Yes, please, sure.
This is a bad idea for us, but about the restoration of habitats. A few days ago, we had 40 years after the Chernobyl disaster, Chernobyl accident. And we human are calling this as Chernobyl disaster. But from a point of view of animals and plants, wild animals and plants, it was a Chernobyl miracle. Because what is now happening in a Chernobyl zone, it's in fact miracle. They have biological diversity has increased times. They have natural woods. They have thriving populations of wild animals, and this is only one reason why this happened, because there is no human in this territory. So I don't know if it is a good idea, but we need to push out some humans from specific territories, and I think it helps.
Andrei, what do you think?
Yes, I completely agree. The preservation of habitats should be a priority, and also talking about the preservation of genetic material, it's also related to this theme, for example, that we have centers which preserve biological information or human like gametes and so on, but everything depends on the infrastructure, on financing, and also I started thinking about other kind of creature which is endangered as scientists. That with current policies of Trump and Trump administration, and other politician mimicking it, there were cancellations of databases, long-term projects, and so on. So if we're thinking that, for example, the preserving some material will save the species, we should keep in mind also this issue of scale. So we need to, if you want to preserve, seed banks or whatever genetic material, you also need to diversify, to place them in as many independent parts of the world as possible. And the same goes, for species preservation. So why we need habitats? Because habitat is kind of like a buffer for the or the effective environment for the existence of species. And species needs many conditions, on its existence. It's not, sufficient, to just create an organism. You place it in nature, most cases it will just die out there because conditions are wrong, really, So the expansions of habitats, because we have those scaling laws of biogeography and macroecology, that you have much more species in bigger islands or bigger continents. How this happens? Because of the diversity of habitats. It's kind of like you need to have many populations which are uncorrelated to each other in the case of some kind of unfortunate event, either asteroid or a nuclear explosion happens, or volcano, or some kind of war ravages on. So you cannot place all your treasures in small areas. You need big areas, with wildlife, for them to sustain themselves. And you also should keep in mind that species exist for millions of years. This strategy should work for millions of years. It's kind of this is the real horizon of species existence. So we need to also change the frame of mind on this stability, because I've seen the current world. For example, we have nature reserves, but what happens if somebody decides now to go to war through this nature reserve? So it means that you need much more nature reserves, not just single one of them. In that case, you should account for this volatility. There is like a natural volatility of nature, but there is an additional layer of volatility caused by human existence, just human existence. The new technologies, new demands for materials, changes in geopolitical climate, and so on.
Celia, I would like to ask you as well, what do you think? Maybe you have something to add, and taking into account that bacteria evolving super fast, a lot quicker than animals or plants. So is it actually possible to preserve them in some specific state?
Yeah, indeed, microbiologists, they rely a lot on biobanks of microorganisms. So we preserve the species in that way. Is a normal procedure. And I was giving the example of Chernobyl. I think that we do not need to take only that example. If we think about the lockdown, is not related with microorganisms, but the lockdown period during COVID, we could see that in many places we could see the wildlife coming back again. So I think the Homo sapiens is the worst enemy for nature and for the wild world. The microorganisms, they evolve fast, but now that we are talking about diversity, there is something interesting about microorganisms that probably applies also to plants, for instance, is that we travel a lot nowadays, and we have goods always being transported from one side to the other. So we are somehow we are taking microorganisms from one place to the other, and that started probably in the Middle Age when we started to move. And I think all this is part of invasion, is part of extinction, because when you introduce a new species, probably you are downsizing the others. And this is part of the evolution. And I think that what we are doing, at least in the microbial world, I think that with our intervention, we are accelerating the process. Probably we are not creating anything special. We are simply accelerating the process. And probably we must let it go in a certain way. So why to preserve all and everything? Maybe I'm wrong, but
Someone would like to add?
We are acting as very classical invasive species, the most invasive species.
So we've mentioned that there are other ways to save species from extinction, right? And then the question may arise, why do researchers pursue the extinction? Maybe it's better to, try to save what we have here. So is it really a scientific goal then, or a PR, as was mentioned in the beginning by Andrei? So would you like to add something, Andrei, to that?
I think it's interesting endeavor. I call PR this specific case, because we just kind of cosmetically added several genes and call this completely kind of new resurrected species, even though the overall, how to say, genetic difference was much larger in magnitude. It's kind of like introducing a couple of genes, from human to chimpanzee and say that you recreated human from chimpanzee, something like that. But as was mentioned, this development of technologies, how can you have to change the genome, or for example, how you can read old material, old paleogenetic material is also very important. A recent Nobel Prize was given for this ancient DNA studies, and ancient DNA is kind of a new source, for the whole new source of information, massive source. And for example, I would guess now that there are much more of the ancient DNA than living DNA, given in mind how much soil you have, and permafrost, you have like hundreds of meters of permafrost, which is full packed with organic remains, which stuck there for hundreds of thousands of years. It's a huge source of information for the comparative studies, what happened with nature, how well we understand how it changes. We can use this information for predicting the future states of currently living organisms. It has many so-called exaptations, this pursuit of technology. Exaptation is kind of like a term developed in evolutionary biology, in which you have like adaptation. It's kind of like adapting for some purpose. Exaptation is kind of like a side effect, beneficial side effect of this adaptation or technological adaptation. So scientists pursuing it for the sake of it. We just interested, how ancient animals existed. If we will be successful, it will be extremely interesting, to see how this extinct animal looked like. If we have a direct proof that their genome or phenotype is directly corresponding, to what is found, and in a way of that, we will develop many interesting tools which will be used, in all big swaths of science.
Radvila, why do researchers pursue the extinction? In your opinion?
It's a way to get attention, of course. In plants, for example, it's more not the way to resurrect the species, but to play with the plant, to give it some sort of features that were never there. For example, fluorescence. There's probably 3 or 4 different startups, and they are developing the plant that fluorescence at night. So it's a lampstand with a plant, and at night it's fluorescence. So that's the one way you can play with a plant. Also, there is a moss that has a fragrance of a flower. So yeah, that's the way scientists are changing plants and giving them some new features. And it's a way, of course, to get funding for those projects. I know that Massachusetts Institute of Technology also developed plants that emit light. So, yeah.
Yossi?
I think 2 things: curiosity and love. Curiosity as a basis for all research, as a main stimulus for all researchers, and why love? Because when we are working with some species for 5 or for 10 years, or even for whole our lives, we fall in love with this species, with some plants, with some animals, with some bacteria, and if you're talking about the whole idea of this de-extinction, not Colossal was a pioneer in that field. As far as I know, the idea was generated by several authors, several Australian researchers who had an idea to de-extinct thylacine. And in fact, the main stimulus of them to do this was love to that species that their fathers were able to see in nature, and now the species is extinct. So we tried, and after that, Colossal take that idea and spread to other species.
We have had a very broad discussion and explored topic from different perspectives. So as my final question, I would like every of you to choose one word in response to our title today. Should we call the extinction a hope, hype, or a hazard? So maybe we can start from Celia this time. Hazard. Yes.
I will say hope, but not in the sense that we understand this word. Hope for a new knowledge and hope for new technologies, but not a hope for the extinction.
Radvila?
It's so nice that we have different opinions. I was sure that we will say the same word.
We'll need second discussion.
Yeah. I would choose hype. I think it's a hype.
And Andrei?
In my understanding, it's opportunity.
There is no that word. So you have to choose one.
That's my choice.
I think that hope would be the closest one. Yeah. So, yeah, hope for opportunity. Thank you all for your insights. It was really interesting for me, and I hope that it was interesting for you as well, and for everyone who came here. Yeah, so thank you so much.